You're listening to the Empowered Divorce Podcast, where you practice being the chooser in your life again, one day at a time. Thanks for joining me. Hello, my amazing listeners. I am so excited to have you join me and my awesome guest, Tony Overbay. Tony is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified mindful habit coach, and a popular motivational speaker. He is the host of the Virtual Couch podcast, as well as the podcast Waking Up to Narcissism. I'm going to tell you how I came to know Tony in our conversation today. Having Tony join me today is a pretty cool full circle. We are talking about how to break free from a narcissist. I know for many of you, this is part of your story. So I am thrilled to have one of the experts in the field come join me in talking about this with you. I have also learned that as soon as we get on Zoom, I hit record because half the time we'll just get to talking and I realize I'm like, wait a minute, I should have hit record. So I hit record right away and leaving in a little bit of our conversation as soon as we jumped on. Both our brains move so fast and mostly in the same direction, so we tend to cover many topics and often end up going down a topic path. And then we'll stop and go, wait, how do we get here? But I love it. And I hope you will love this conversation as much as I did. 2 parts this week and next. So stay tuned and enjoy. I was thinking, I know I messaged you just a couple ideas, but I was thinking one of the things that is the hardest for a lot of my clients to wrap their heads around is and you're such an expert in this, is the narcissism and narcissistic tendencies. I love how you always clarify that. But when those behaviors escalate, once separation,
yes,
they start to head to separation. Once the narcissist recognizes that they cannot control their partner anymore, or they can't control the situation, or it's not going to work out, those abusive behaviors just skyrocket. Then all of a sudden I feel like most of my women are in this space of like, whoa, what is happening? And now they're trying to divorce with escalated behaviors that just gets worse and worse. It's like, who did I marry? What just happened? Because they go from trying to work it out, maybe seeing couples therapy, trying to work it out, from healing from infidelity or other injuries, and then boom, it just explodes.
Yeah.
Oh, I see a lot of the trauma bonding.
Yes.
Right? Where they're confused and still maybe falling prey to some of the nice things that he maybe does do in between. And then you've got the kids that are being pulled into the narcissistic partner narrative. And so there's that little cluster. There is really what I keep coming back to when I think about what I want to talk to you about and hear your about.
Well, and what I like about that, Amy, is I would even say 2 or 3 weeks ago, I want to make the joke and say I had ridiculously inaccurate information. And now I finally have good information. No, I had good information, but I've been just obsessed with the concepts around being differentiated for 10 months now. And the more that I learn about what it really means to be differentiated and the steps it takes and the time it takes, and then what it looks like, I think it's so important to start working on this concept of being differentiated because those buttons are going to get pushed and because things are going to get amped up. And now I want to say, wait, are we recording right now? Because I don't want to waste all my gold.
Right, we are recording. That's why.
Okay.
Really,
I know, right? But I don't know if you're like, okay, yes. Okay, because I could jump in anywhere here because this is great timing.
Cool that you talked about this. Okay, first of all, I have to tell my listeners, Tony, I know I told you this on my other podcast.
No, I was hoping you would tell this because this made me feel so good. And also I felt bad that I felt so good about it. So I was going to say, hey, Amy, can you hit stop for a minute and tell me that story again?
No, I'm hitting record and I want all my listeners to know. And you are going to have to sit there and let me gush because.
Okay.
So my listeners, y'all, years ago, I mean, they were not talking about betrayal trauma. They were not talking that pornography was an addiction and that all the things that it can happen create injury 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And when I had left my husband, knowing that he was struggling with pornography, knowing that it was something that was a big part of the injury around our relationship, infidelity, no language. I didn't really know. There was that one book I think I mentioned to you, sitting in a rowboat throwing marbles at a battleship or sitting.
Yeah. I
That
think I
was
went
the
and got it because you'd told me about it. And that was a pretty funny, yeah. Uh,
that was the only resource I had.
mhm,
It did help bring some like cognitive
mhm.
awareness to my experience, but I cleaned houses. That's what I did to try and earn money as a single mom. And I was at my friend's house, the Curtises, vacuuming her living room when I had fallen upon your podcast, The Virtual Couch. And I still am going to get emotional. Okay, now you can get emotional.
Mhm.
But I was listening to your podcast and you were talking about pornography and how it is an addiction. And you were at that point, maybe you still are, working with men and really trying to you had a program specifically for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I still do the path back.
You
Yeah.
really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what it was. And so you
Yeah.
were talking about this, but you gave language to what I was experiencing. And I was sobbing as I'm vacuuming this client's house, trying to earn money, as my marriage just absolutely imploded and my life exploded because of this behavior. And I was so grateful to have a language to that. And I just ate up everything that you had said. It really just was so amazing. And I remember you telling me like that was early, like you had just
Yeah. I was really, really early.
started this work on podcasting. It was new. Podcasting was new,
Yep. Yep.
but it is just an honor and surreal to be sitting here with such a full circle. And what I'm doing now for a living and where my life is 10 years later, it's just unbelievable to me. And I'm just so grateful. And so thank you for being here.
Hey, I do like this story, but it does make me feel very self-conscious. So I was hanging in there about halfway through, and now I think I'm blushing in red. But no, thank you. That means a lot. It really does, because especially early on, I didn't know if anybody was even listening, and I just felt like I just wanted to share these things because I just wanted to share them. And I know early on was when I was really starting to talk about pornography, that people turn to it when they don't feel connected in their marriage or their parenting or their faith or their health or their career, and so then they turn to that as this unhealthy coping mechanism. And then that's some of the stuff that started leading to looking at people showing up pretty emotionally immature because they are unwilling to self-confront or deal with any discomfort at all. And then it's easier to project it onto a spouse and say, well, if you would do this, then I would. And all of that is just the beginnings of the emotional immaturity / narcissistic traits and tendencies journey as well. So it's just all kind of starts to play together.
It really does. And watching your work, because I have kept an eye on your work and watching how you have developed that and how really our field has developed around
Mhm.
this is remarkable. I love it. I love what I do and I love what you do. So I wanted you to come on specifically because of the work that I've followed, that you have been doing a lot around with narcissism
Mhm.
and emotional immaturity around that. I love, Tony, how you are careful to say, to not diagnose, okay, they are all
Yeah.
narcissists, right? Because
Right.
that a
Yes.
lot, oh, I'm married to a narcissist or I'm divorcing a
Yeah.
narcissist. And so I do like that. Look, we have tendencies, we have behaviors. Really, it's emotional immaturity.
Yep. And we all have that. We all have that.
All have that, but to
Yeah.
an extreme level because you're not willing to look at yourself and not
Yeah,
willing,
exactly.
and it grows. Unhealed trauma creates personality disorder. So you really are
Mhm.
diving into a lot of this. This is what my clients are dealing with who are divorcing, where they are noticing these behaviors, these tendencies escalate once
Mhm.
they head towards divorce, once that separation, once it's like, okay, it's not working out. I'm going to get divorced. A lot of my women are the ones that initiate it. That control that the narcissist, and I'm just going to label for,
Yeah. Less syllables. I do the same often. I start by saying it's the narcissist or the person with narcissistic traits and tendencies or the person on the emotionally immature scale or spectrum.
there
Let's
we
just say
go.
narcissist for the rest of the podcast. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So when they realize they are losing that control,
Mhm.
that is when those behaviors start to amp up. And a lot of my listeners are left wondering what the hell just happened?
Mhm.
What is going on? Who did I marry? Why is this amping up? Why is this getting worse? So I would love to talk a little bit about why that might be.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, any thoughts just right out of
Oh,
the, no, that
yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, no,
wide open.
it's a great one. It's a great one. Because I think what is still fascinating is I almost say we got to start back at the why I did a episode on Wake Up to Narcissism a little while ago that I worked on, where I was saying it's odd that the origin stories of the narcissist and the emotional, or the narcissist, and then I call the partner the pathologically kind, because that is in their bones, their DNA, that's pathologized, which is an awesome thing when it is admired, when it's respected, when it's not manipulated or used against that person. But that, and I had Ross Rosenberg on my podcast a long time ago. He wrote the book Human Magnet Syndrome, and he is the one that Human Magnet Syndrome talks about, that kind person and the narcissist. They form that human magnet, and then it's a really difficult bond to break, because that pathologically kind person is the one that's continually trying to figure out, how can I help? How can I make the relationship better? I'll go do all the work. And meanwhile, the narcissist is just busy doing whatever they want to do. And so they're not doing the work. And so then we'll just go with the gender stereotype, because data shows that more men are narcissists. And I love when I'll get people that will still email me, because I do work with people that the woman is the more emotionally mature narcissistic. And that's a whole other thing. But then when people will say, well, how do you even know that more men are? And there's just I think it's about a 10-year, 400,000 person study from the University of Buffalo that shows that. So that's not bad data, but a good decade and 500,000 people. So I'm going to go with that right now. But
Yep.
So for the rest of we'll call it narcissist, and it will be the guy is, but we know that a woman could be, and then the woman is the pathologically kind. But so I was talking about how the origin story is a little bit similar, because oftentimes it's that pathologically kind person that was the people pleaser, or was the person that would basically take everybody in the family's discomfort, and then they would manage it. They would make sure if mom and dad are angry, I'll take care of the kids, or they would try to figure out, okay, how do I need to show up so that I don't get in trouble? And then often you have that highly sensitive person who is good at reading the room. Well, so now that person comes from maybe some parents that aren't maybe as present, or they're going through their own stuff. And then that's a little where the narcissist comes from as well, is when it's this childhood defense mechanism to feeling like that if they get in trouble, their parents are going to get really angry. So that gaslighting becomes a childhood defense mechanism. A lot of people believe that narcissism starts out as it's a coping mechanism when they have not seen healthy relationships modeled, because really it's that they only know what they know. So if they saw somebody that never took ownership, if they didn't see anybody practicing empathy, if they saw people that were emotionally inconsistent, then that is the air they breathe. And so now you put those two together, and that's where I think this is an interesting concept that I've been hearing more lately. We meet others that have similar trauma. There's a nicer way to say it, where it's like, we're equally differentiated, but there's a familiar there, which is really fascinating.
Yep.
Man, see here, I'm going to go in 900 directions already. I'm not even close to the question you asked, because I also think what's so fascinating is I love looking at the different attachment styles, anxious and avoidant.
Yes.
And I was doing this live Q&A a few nights ago, and then I carted out this information that I think is fascinating that I used to not talk about, because I never wanted the moms to feel bad, because the moms are going through so much. But when you look at the origin story of the anxious attachment, that it's often mom is a primary caregiver. But then I think that then the psychology just says, and then if she is not fully present, or if she's sick, or if she's overwhelmed, or that sort of thing. And I think that we leave off the point of, well, why is she overwhelmed? Maybe she's with the emotionally immature narcissistic guy. But then when she's feeling down, and then a kid comes to her and says, basically, hey, I need to know if I exist. I want validation. And if the mom's like, man, I can't do that right now. But then when the mom says, okay, I don't feel good about myself. Hey, am I a good mom? And the kid's kind of like, well, I'm busy right now, but this is what I want. So then I will give you that validation. Now, when that kid, boy or girl, goes out into the world, and then they're saying, okay, all I want is for somebody to care, but they don't really know what that feels like. So then if somebody cares, then it seems like too much. But if it's this person that is a little bit distant, then they're going to go pursue them. And now that person is going to say, okay, well, I know how to keep people. You pretend that you are all these things. I think I will love bomb. And so it's like the two are doing this dance that they don't even know is a dance. It just feels familiar. And so that's fascinating right there. So, and now we're off, right?
Yep. Now we're off to the races. And then it implodes and it explodes. And then they're trying to figure out, okay, now we're divorcing and now we're separating. But something you said there, I think is really important too. This, and maybe we just dive into the trauma bonding, because I think, like you're saying, the nice
partner, right? So
Mhm.
the woman, the wife who is the nice, kind, trying to fix it, trying to understand, trying to even understanding that her partner might have these issues
Sure.
in their
Yeah.
past. They understand they've been injured or have trauma. And isn't that interesting how that plays into sucking them back into the bond? Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the abusive behavior because he had a hard childhood. And so, right, that is another.
Because what's that? Yeah. Because what's that role that that person, again, go back to the highly sensitive person or the people pleaser or the fixer, then okay, I can help. I can fix.
I
This is my
understand.
role.
I'm compassionate. I
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I can be there. And maybe that will fix. And so, yeah, that's part of this circle, this bond that doesn't go away,
Yeah.
but needs to when we're divorcing. And it's confusing. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance, right? When,
Mhm.
okay, I
Mhm.
know he isn't safe and it's why I need to leave, but I'm still trying to make sense of what happened.
Yeah.
You're not Here's another thing that's interesting, Tony, is that they're not often, majority of my women are not divorcing with full disclosure. They don't have all of the truth around the narcissist behaviors. Oh, they don't have all that information, right? Cognitively. And
Yeah.
now they're also left with trying to put pieces together of how did this happen? And now there's no amends, there's no apology, there's no amicability, which isn't that interesting how that escalates the behavior too. It
It
escalates
does.
the trauma that the woman experiences through divorce because there's no amends, there's no sense. And now it's getting worse. Why? What am I doing? And I see them
No.
try and fix it even more. And
Yeah.
just gives me
Okay,
messy.
so yeah, let's jump in there too because that trauma bond, it's this concept of intermittent reinforcement, and I don't know if you've talked about that origin story of that, but it goes back to this psychologist Skinner, P.F. Skinner, who had this experiment with rats, and then they were giving them a reward when they pulled a little lever. It probably was adorable, and then they all of a sudden said, okay, now let's do no reward that comes from the lever, and we'll see how long it takes them to stop pulling the lever. But the little mice went crazy pulling the lever to the point where then they would not eat, drink, die because the intermittent reinforcement, this thing that gave them the reward that was also giving them the punishment. And so then that is what the narcissist does. It's like I will give you the reward and I will give you the punishment. So you're relying upon me to then relieve you of the pain that I cause you. And then it hits the same parts of the brain like an addiction. So then when somebody all of a sudden feels bad, they end this withdrawal and they need their little hit of that feel good drug of the narcissist. And so you can see
Yeah.
why they're going to continue to try to go back and fix it and figure it out. Because I want that little dopamine dump. I want to feel like I'm okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so wild.
Because don't you hear all the time around that? Well, but he can be
Oh
nice.
man.
There,
Yeah.
right? But there is good in him. And it's like, and I
Oh, Amy,
think
yeah. I would say,
I
do you see that too? Yeah.
oh, all the time. I hear this all the time. And I hear you say, you cannot have a good marriage when there is bad behavior consistently
No.
happening. You don't stay in a marriage when there's just drops of those breadcrumbing, right, of good
Right.
things. And that's that experiment that just talked about makes so much sense. And I see that play out in my clients
Hmm.
where they are looking for the hand that hurt them to heal them.
Yeah. And we see that so often. I'm thinking about when I used to do more older teenager therapy and it would be someone's first love. Then they want to process the breakup with the person that just broke up with them. And right. You see that all the time. And then
Yeah.
I will say, I like that you brought up because you're talking to somebody, you finally build a little bit of empathy or rapport with them. And then they are sharing how bad the relationship is. And right. You start, man, that sounds rough. Like no one should deserve to be in a relationship like that. And that's where you immediately see that switch flip and like, I mean, but he is good with the kids, but he is, and that's where I know, oh man, there it is, right there. And I think that's where I had to come up with this concept or this term of where, as a couples therapist, I would get people in and they're like, hey, no, we had a good weekend, and I'll say, oh, tell me about it, and they're like, well, we stopped fighting, basically. So then I'm saying, okay, the absence of bad actually is not good, but that's what we think it is because there was no connection, there was no deep dive, there's no intimacy, emotional intimacy. It's like we got really angry. We went to our bunkers. Somebody was super uncomfortable, popped their head out and said, "Are we good?" And the other person that made them feel better. So we're good.
Mhm.
We're good. that's not
The
that good.
bleeding might have stopped,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
gushing of the blood might have stopped, but the wound is still there. It has
Yeah.
scabbed over, and before long, you're going to be gushing again. And that's the pattern, and that's the cycle. You think the abusive behavior escalates during
Yeah.
a separation divorce?
Okay. So I'm gonna go back a little bit, and then I probably will go back to that question. If not, remind me, because I have an answer for that. But I feel like we'll go in the Wayback Machine a little bit, and so when I think I maybe had 300 episodes of the Virtual Couch, and then I started this Waking Up the Narcissism podcast, and I won't bore you with the more I'm seeing, the more couples. I mean, I think I've done work with 15, 1600 couples now. It's been 20 years as a therapist, and you just start seeing certain things. You provide tools to some couples, and it's like manna from heaven or water in an oasis, and then they can't wait, and then they get them, and then they live happily ever after. I mean, there's still bumps in the road, and then and others, it's like somebody takes that tool and they're like, oh, thank you. I can use this against her now. Okay. I got my beloved 4 pillars. My first pillar is giving someone the benefit of the doubt, assuming good intentions, or there's a reason why somebody does what they do. And then second one, you can't tell somebody they're wrong, or you don't believe them. Even if you think they're wrong, you don't believe them. I'm gonna do this such a disservice because this really isn't what I want to get to more. And then there's the questions before comments, and don't go into a victim stance, because somebody can just say, you're right, I'm a horrible person, because they want their partner to rescue them. But the reason I bring that up is like, there'll be a couple in my office, and again, we're going with the guy here, going big, where then he's saying, okay, well, what do I do if she's not assuming good intentions about the things I'm saying? Well, then I'm like, but you are aware of that? Oh yeah. And they're like, okay, well, let's get her. Let's jump in. And I'm like, well, then if you're aware of it, and you have to assume good intentions about why she's not assuming good intentions. And it's like, oh, the guy's so frustrated, because you hand somebody a new tool, and then they're going to weaponize it. And I see that over and over. Like even this concept of differentiation that I'm going to get to is it's really about, at the end of the day, everything is a me issue, but meaning that for me. So why do I need that person to understand? Why am I getting so upset? Why do I not share my truth? And so then when you have somebody that's coming in and they want to really understand themselves, and we get to this point of being differentiated, that's a me issue. So then it makes sense that, well, if everything's a me issue, then I'm saying this kindly, well, then that's a you issue. But then the narcissist gets that, and then now they go everything out of their mouth. It's like, well, that's a you issue. That's a you problem, right? Where it's like, okay, that's not the point. So anyway, you start seeing people weaponize these things. So then I do this, I start this new podcast, and the whole point of Waking Up to Narcissism was that I really do believe that people throw that word around so often. I mean, if you just listen to pop culture, it's everybody's boss, everybody's ex, everybody's mother-in-law,
The narcissist.
Yeah, right. And so, and no one, when they hear that, goes, let me go do a little digging on that. It's like, how dare you? And so then that's where I'm thinking, okay, narcissistic personality disorder is some 3, 4, 5% of the population. So what is it? And that's where I started uncovering this emotional immaturity. And then when I'm like, okay, tiny bit of the population is narcissistic, but we're all emotionally immature. And that was I think a good thing for people to hear, because now if somebody's saying, hey, can you maybe listen to some of this? And somebody is more willing to do a little bit of self-confrontation around emotional immaturity than being called a narcissist. Because I always say the number one rule of, Narcissist Club is you don't tell a narcissist they're a narcissist. So far, that's never worked. And I don't use all or nothing statements, right?
Right.
Yeah. But then people will often like email me or they're saying, I know you said not to, but I really thought that if I shared this concept with them, then you go, oh my gosh, I'm a narcissist. But they're not going to do that. So that's a big, long way to say that then all of a sudden, the part of that was because the population I'm working with, nobody knows if somebody's a narcissist or emotionally immature, because we don't know what we don't know. So then they start hearing from others, or maybe this podcast says, and then if you, in essence, read a book about narcissism, that the message it conveys, and probably know where I'm going with this one, but it's like, hey, stop in the middle of this paragraph, pack your stuff and go. But so then the person's like, oh, well, that doesn't feel good, but I don't think he's a narcissist. So then now they have to go try to figure it out. So I felt like the population I was working with are people that they're just trying to understand, is it me? Like I'm trying, but I can't seem to make sense of this. And I keep trying, but then he's telling me that isn't right, or I didn't do that. Here comes the gaslighting. So then it's like, okay, I'll go back and get more research and more data. I'll figure this out. But right. So then it's like, they have to go through the process themselves to really understand if this relationship is as bad as it sounds like it is. Now, my humorous joke at the end of that is like, by the time whatever it takes, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it takes, as long as it takes, And then the person's out of the relationship. And it's going to be what we're talking about today, because it gets so bad. That's where then I think then that's the person that writes the book and says, trust me, if you think this is the case, run. Because I get it now, because that's somebody that's been through it. And they're saying, man, that took a lot out of me. So that from there in the podcast, I came up with these 5 rules of interacting with a narcissist or emotionally immature person. And it's the first one is raise your emotional baseline, which is my concept of self-care. Second one is get your PhD in gaslighting. Third one is get out of unproductive conversations. Fourth one is set healthy boundaries. Know that a boundary is different than an ultimatum. Is you need to stop this. A boundary is if you don't stop, I will leave. But then know that the narcissist is going to challenge the boundary. They're going to say, oh, that's adorable. I know what to do with this. But the big one was the 5th one, where you'll never give a person the aha moment or the epiphany. So then, and that one is the hardest one to give up for the pathologically kind, right?
Hardest one.
Hey, why do you
they
think?
really think that they can be the one to enlighten them, to give them that light bulb moment. And then, like you were saying before, the person will go, oh, that's what I've been doing to you. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, I didn't even know. Yeah.
No,
but instead they hear greatest hits like, well, you do it too, or I didn't do that, or, oh, well, you think you're so smart. So then in the meanwhile too, and I think this is going to be where you're wanting the answer I think you were looking for is so then, but the more that she does try to give him that aha moment or epiphany, and it really doesn't matter for a little while if she hears me say it on a podcast or you say it, but it's like, she's like, okay, I understand, but now that I have this data, I think I can. And so, but then every time she does, she's like saying, hey, here's some more buttons that you can push later, because these are things that really matter to me. Because you're saying, hey, you know what? I've learned now that what you're doing is actually gaslighting. And I think that it might come from your childhood wounding, right? And it's like, oh, because you had a perfect childhood? I'm not gaslighting you. You're gaslighting me. I would hear that kind of stuff all the time, because it's like, oh, I just showed you a tool that apparently you've researched, you know what it is. And so now if I use that against you, I can get you to get really angry. And that's that thing where the immature or the narcissistic person, and if we want to get really psychologically deep dive, they really lack a sense of self. And so basically they need another human to interact with to know that they even matter or exist. And so that just means,
they need
hey, come. Yeah.
I really want to, like, that is so key right there. And I want my ladies to hear this. They need you and your reaction and your response to give them a sense of self.
Yeah.
And this is why I say all the time to my clients, like, take emotion out of it. Be more, do not give them anything to weaponize against you. You cannot be their sense of self in any way.
No.
And the more you stay in that cycle, they will continue to use you for that. And I love it.
Amy, I fall into that as a therapist at times where, and I think, well, the person's in here and we're doing couples therapy, and we're looking at, are they immature or narcissistic? And so then I think, well, my job is, I mean, they're coming to me because they've heard the podcast. They're here, they're in my office. So maybe I can give them the aha moment. I don't even realize I'm doing that. And that's where, I immediately know when I've done it too, because I'm saying, okay, well, I think maybe what I've seen is this. And they're like, oh, well, that's not the case here. This is, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I've been lately trying to, I'll probably call it something different, but I'm calling it an attack surface. So I basically just said, hey, here's something you can attack and try to make me feel bad about. Now, I like to think I'm differentiated enough where I'm like, oh man, that breaks my heart that this person thinks that that's how they have to show up to matter. What do they think that, okay, telling the therapist that he's an idiot in front of my wife is going to make everybody go, you're right. And she's like, that's my guy. I mean, and so it breaks my heart that they think that that's the way they have to show up in order to matter or to have somebody acknowledge them. But it goes back to that, this false self. So when you really don't know who you are, then you need someone else to interact with to have you feel. And so then unfortunately that feel is, I got to put you in the one down position. I got to take the one up position. So give me anything and I will tell you, I didn't say that. That doesn't matter to me. And it can be something where the day before, the morning, the person said, the only thing that matters to me is this. So then you go back to them like, hey, I was thinking about the fact that you said this is the thing that matters. And they're like, I never said that. That's ridiculous. Really? You think that? Because then it's like, I can make you feel bad and that makes me feel better. And then now that I believe, and we'll get to this, I believe alleviated my discomfort, I'm good. So as a matter of fact, where do you want to go to dinner? Because I'm good. But you just left that person devastated because they're like, I don't know what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so confusing. I think you talked about being differentiated, and let's just move it because
Okay. Yeah.
so when these ladies they're separated, they're divorced, they're trying to, and I don't think you co-parent with a narcissist as parallel
Yeah.
parent personally, because you're not going to be on the same page. You're not going to have the same values and concepts around children. So you can't like coexist with the same, right, with kids. So it's more parallel parenting, what I see. And so talk to me about how they can work on this, on being differentiated
Yeah.
post-separation divorce with someone who is presenting narcissistic.
I'm going to do it to you again, but it's in a good way. I'm going to go back a little bit. But
No, I
it's
love
only
it. I
because
love it. You got to go back.
Okay, but this is breaking news on your podcast and your podcast only, is that the part that I know, even as I'm saying this out loud, I think I will welcome the yeah buts, because I'm confident that this is a solid principle, but I think that it's going to need to be started well early in the relationship. So the people that I think I'm working with, they're maybe in my women's Facebook group or listen to the podcast, or the reason I dig this differentiation stuff so much is so the definition of differentiation. And the reason I've been obsessed with it is I knew it by the simplistic definition of it's maintaining a connection with somebody without having to defend yourself or tell them that they're wrong. But then I've had Jennifer Finlayson Fife on my podcast a few times, and she's a big differentiation therapist. And I had her on at one point, and I was talking about, so I'm an emotionally focused therapy therapist, the EFT therapist. So my couples model is based off of it's attachment. Their attachment. Not, I just want to go to wounds. Attachment styles. Yes, they do. And so there's, not that this is the only kind of couples therapist, but that there's an attachment therapist, and then you got somebody like Jennifer, or there was David Schnarch, or these people that are more like differentiation therapists. And so I just happened to ask her on this episode where I just said, hey, what do you know about EFT, emotionally focused therapy, what my pillars are based off of? And then she just said, I know it, but she said something to the effect of, but I think I don't like where the locus of control is. And I remember just thinking like, okay, I can understand that because in attachment theory, I'm basically, or an EFT, I'm handing my heart to somebody. We call them emotional bids. And basically you're saying, hey, I'm going to try to heal this attachment wound with you. We're designed to deal with emotion in concert with another human. I love that phrase. But I'm going to hand you my heart and then count on you. Do you have my back? Are you there for me? Do you love me? So then if they take that and then scrunch it up and throw it on the ground and stomp on it, man, that is handing that locus of control to somebody that can really hurt you. So differentiation though. So then all of a sudden I said, okay, what do I not know that I don't know about differentiation? And that started a journey that I love so much now, because I still think that the emotionally focused therapy, or my 4 pillars, is an ideal way to communicate, because it goes into this assumption that we have different meanings for everything. For words, we have different expectations for our relationships. We're 2 different people. So it's a way to try to communicate. But then let's just say when it doesn't necessarily go well, instead of then in this case, the pathologically kind person doing the what's wrong with me, then instead it's like differentiation is the way I'm going to learn about myself and develop my autonomy is in a relationship while I'm trying to also find connection. So I have to have a relationship to then help me understand myself so I can find myself. I think David Schnarch says, he says, differentiation, people's ability to balance humankind's 2 most fundamental drives, our desire for attachment and connection on the one hand, and our desire to be an individual and direct the course of our own lives on the other. And so the latter refers to the ability to hold on to yourself when important people in your life pressure you to conform. Differentiation yields emotional autonomy, the basis of healthy interdependence and the foundation for intimacy and stability in long-term relationships. And I think that when I go back to why this origin story is so important, that I don't believe any of us, pathologically kind, emotionally immature, had, and this is a bless our parents' hearts, they only knew what they knew. But if we didn't see it modeled, then the thing that we were not looking for is interdependence, or we think that codependency or that enmeshment that we must be one is what we're supposed to do. But when and that's where we get into a relationship, you're only really showing the best version of yourself. You're agreeing to things that maybe you're not quite sure of, but you don't want this person to leave. You really, you want a connection. So either consciously or subconsciously, I'll deal with these things later. And I give it silly examples. Like if she says, do you like romantic comedies? I'm like, don't, but I like her. But if I say that, she's going to leave. And I'm like, oh, love them. Like they're awesome. And then she's like, which ones? I'm like, I'll name one. like literally, please, so I can tell you that I like it. But then in my mind, I'm like, I gotta go start watching romantic comedies. But then, if I say, well, what about you? You like sports? She's like, all of them. You name a sport, I dig it. And I'm like, I don't know if I really buy that, but I'm not going to push it because she's cute. And so then we get into that codependent mesh relationship. Now we're going through life and all of a sudden we experience something and now we have two different opinions, but we never saw the modeling of how to communicate our desires, our wishes, our hopes, our dreams. So when we say, oh, I think this, now that immaturity is like, oh, that means you don't like me. So like, oh no, I'm just saying I like chicken and you like steak. Or it's like, okay, so you think I'm wrong. Well, your chicken's kind of dumb. You're like, well, you liked chicken last week, but no, I didn't. I mean, and you start seeing that emotional immaturity kick in right away. And so that's why I think the differentiation thing is so important, because the goal, and I do this little thing in my hands, like we get codependent and meshed, but then we go through life and we start trying to be differentiated. We try to have our own thought or opinion, but then it threatens the relationship. So then the more immature person is going to push buttons to get the person back in enmeshment. Because differentiation is really where one person ends and the other begins, but then there's a bunch of invalidation in the middle. So now you look at that pathologically kind, and then that person, the emotionally immature or narcissist, who the way that they think that they exist or matter or what they think love is control. I need you to be with me or I will not exist and I will not have love. So then if you start exerting your independence, then you obviously don't care about me and you want to leave me. And the only tools I have in my tool chest are to tell you, you'll never make it. You're a bad person. I'll tell the kids, I'll whatever. And then it's like, okay, fine, I'll come back. And then, oh, my anxiety is alleviated. I feel better. Like, isn't that wild when you look at it that way?
So wild. I have a way less psychologically profound way of describing it. I just call it control bubbles.
Oh, okay. Tell me. I need more of these
like
things,
you have
Amy.
your control bubble and they have their control bubble, and this is your independence. This is their independence. And we want to have an interdependent relationship. And then we have a couple bubble around the both of you.
I like that.
That we have to formulate. And the coupleship has its own set of values, non-negotiables. You have your own individual values and sense of non-negotiables. But what happens, and I look at that as differentiation, and we're trying to experience life in this coupleship together,
like,
but we have to stay independent in our own sense of self. And when we are looking for something outside of the coupleship to fulfill that sense of self, that's when we get a rupture in the couple bubble, right? And now it's popped. And so this is where like pornography, right? Other people,
yes,
right? Any thirds that one person is bringing into that coupleship without the other partner's awareness or knowledge. We've got a rupture. And then it impacts the attachment, right? Now this person is like, and then they try to like disconnect from themselves to connect to this other person, to hold on to them because they see that they're falling through that rupture, right? Of the couple. So it's very, very basic.
I like that.
But
I need more of that,
right?
That
visual, and I'll draw it on my board just because that visual of you still ultimately need to hold on to your sense of self. Now, my divorced ladies who have experienced what you just talked about, this enmeshment, this codependency, this identifying their worth and value, also partner in the relationship, when they're separating, divorcing, if they don't become differentiated, if they don't find their own sense of self, they will repeat the pattern. They will just what they were missing in this couple bubble in the next relationship.
Well, and thank you for that, because I love that. And I want to take this file and run it on my podcast. I think that would help a lot of people, because I think that makes so much sense, because that enmeshment, codependency, differentiation, I do think a lot of times people do get lost in that lingo. And then it's like, man, he sounds pretty passionate about it, but I don't know. So I like that so much, because it goes with this. To get back to that question that you were asking, is I'm starting to have more success the more I talk about this and helping people recognize all of this data and then trying to become differentiated in the relationship. I mean, if it helps, because really in the world of differentiation, the pressure will change the relationship, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's changing the relationship so that he will then understand and do his work. But it will put pressure on, because David Schnarch says that if you think you're more differentiated than your partner, you're not. And I remember the first time I heard that, I'm like, how dare he? But it's like, wait, what do I not know? But it's basically if you're still trying to get that person to understand versus you understand and you're being and doing. And then if they don't choose, because you've chosen yourself, if they don't choose into the relationship, then that's where I go back to like, if I'm good with myself, then that is unfortunate that they are, because I'm a fun hang and we could have a good time. But I can't convince them of it, because the more I go in and try to convince them, the more they're like, oh, that matters to you? Okay, I've got my attack surface and I can go back to that. So I only say all that stuff because if you're in a relationship and still, then I think that's where it's like the best thing you can do is start to work on that concept of differentiation. And it's not needing somebody else to tell you you're okay. It's knowing you're okay. So then when somebody's trying to say you're selfish. Well, if I'm grounded, if I know who I am, then I want to be the best me. So I've got this solid but flexible sense of self. So that flexible is key, because it's like, well, I'm good. But if you are seeing me as selfish, then I'll take a look at it. But the key that I think I never understood about that is that, but one of those answers can be, thank you for what the data you're giving me, because that helps me understand that even another example where I'm not, because I know myself, but I'm open to change because I want to be the best me. But again, that's a me thing. There's a good part of that. It's a me issue. So I'm in charge of whether or not I think there's truth in that statement. But then some of the stuff that I didn't know is that this concept of these 4 points of balance that Schnarch talks about, but one of them is this quiet mind and calm heart. So that's the ability to self-regulate and self-soothe your anxiety without expecting somebody to do it for you. And I think this is some of those tools that will help in that parallel parenting, because and the things that fall in the need for validation bucket blow me away too, and I think that's what, when you're talking about parallel parenting, I actually don't need him to understand me. I would like for him to, but I can't get him to. So when we continue to say, look, you need to understand, we are in this, we still have kids or whatever, it's still that immature person. It's like, if that's important to you, then I will not be understanding. As a matter of fact, I will show you how not understanding.
And in fact, I'm now going to take it a step further and
Totally.
weaponize this against you and make you hurt, because I'm going to show you that I don't care. And I'm going to absolute opposite. It's these women are experiencing the stories that I hear, right? It's just horrendous, but this is so good. I love this.
Well, and the part I think is really interesting is, so there's another piece of this that I want to talk about this. There's a concept again, a differentiation called, and David Schnarch called it constructing your crucible. And this is one that I just am figuring this out. So he says that it's extracting your unresolved personal issues embedded in your gridlock situation and confronting them as an act of integrity. A lot of words, but when you break it down, your unresolved personal issues embedded in this. So the gridlock situation is where I cannot get another person to understand. We're at a gridlock with this. And with the immature, it's bigger than gridlock. I mean, it's like, it's a battle. It's a battleground.
Right.
But then what is my unresolved personal issue? It might be that I need this person to understand me in order for me to be okay. I need to extract that from here. And it's like, I need to be okay. And then he talks about sometimes this involves owning your projections. So owning my projection is that projection might be that I can get this person to understand. Or the healthy version of this, I realize this as a therapist, is sometimes I'm hiding behind this. I need to just gently meet the client where they're at. Now that I do, but if I see something and they're paying me for my expertise, then I realize that is that just me wanting to alleviate my discomfort, because it's uncomfortable to bring something difficult to someone. So then, and so what he says though, so then it's owning your projection. So my projection might be, well, this person, I don't think they can handle this. Well, how about I give them the opportunity to see if they can handle it, right? Yeah. Because he says, even when your partner doesn't reciprocate, and this is the part I love, you focus on yourself instead of working on your relationship or trying to change your partner. So there is a concept of this where you're doing what you're doing because it's the right thing to do. And you've spent maybe in your marriage, you were trying to do whatever the best thing was to do, not the right thing to do, because you're trying to manage other people's feelings, emotions. You're taking someone else's anger and saying, okay, I'll take it. I'll handle that. So from a place of integrity, then I'm going to do the right thing for me to do, even if that isn't reciprocated or even acknowledged. And I don't need it acknowledged, because that's that need for the external validation. So maybe we land the plane there. It took a while, but it's like, I think you can start to set the table for differentiation even in an unhealthy relationship, because that's part of, I'm going to learn about myself in this. And what I'm learning is that I can't give this person an aha moment and I do need to set boundaries, and boundaries are going to be pushed. And so the me issue there is I need to know I'm okay and how I go about that. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I see that play out with like, I need to be understood. I need to be seen. So
Yep.
with this type of demographic I'm working with, if they're divorced, I see this present like they will spend, and I did this, I totally did this, spend all day formulating a response text message
Oh, yeah.
or email, right?
Yeah.
To try and explain myself because you're being attacked, your integrity is attacked, and all of that, right? And I spend all this time trying to explain myself in the right way to be received because you know them, you know your partner, your ex, and it's like, okay, I know, oh, if I say it this way, then maybe that will all damn day. Trying to get across this message and it is not going to be received, right? And
no,
it's because of what you're saying. Like, really what I'm doing is I'm trying to be heard. I'm trying to be seen for my integrity. I'm trying to be explain, no, what you're saying about me isn't true. And I need to get you to see that this isn't true, that you're wrong. And I will see women spend years in a space of trying to themselves feel better about, especially if they're the ones that chose divorce, right? If they're the ones that got kids involved in the whole thing, that's a whole other kit and caboodle. But like, I need to feel good about my decision. And because the abuse is happening, the control's amping up, the narcissist is still throwing bombs across the road, they will spend a lot of time trying to justify their choice in a integrity way. But really what you're still doing is playing into the game. You're still getting over on his lane. You're still stepping out of your control bubble, so to speak. And what I like what you're saying here is how part of healing and what I am trying to help my clients do is you've got to get back on your side. You've got to bring all parts of you, and I love parts work, but you got to bring all parts of you back to your side of the road too. So the fixer part, the one that wants to explain, the one that wants to be seen as good and right. And I didn't do the wrong thing in this relationship. All those parts have to get back on your side of the road too.
Because you just have to know that you did all you could.
You have to own
that's
that.
The you part, right?
You have to, all parts of you have to come back to your side of the street.
Well, and man, I don't know if I ever asked somebody this, but I'm curious, could I come back? Because I scheduled a 4:00 today, and I still have other things to talk about because
oh my God,
we're just starting to, is that okay? And like right away, can I come back? Because we haven't even got to some of this stuff. Like, I really like this concept of even what you're saying there. I just want to talk about when that pathologically kind person, they're saying, okay, how can I do this so that he won't be in as much pain? And it's like, okay, no, that's a him issue. And I want us to even, I would love to get your take because you've been in that situation before, but it's we still have this tendency to assume that people think and feel similar to us. And so I watch that pathologically kind person so often say, yeah, but I bet he's hurting too. And then I feel like a jerk sometimes. I'm like, actually not. He's like playing video games right now. Because I've had these situations where I had some really unique ones in the couple setting. I know, and I literally have to go here and say, I'm so sorry. But it's like where I watched a person, the narcissistic person, put on quite an emotional show. And then, especially when doing some of the video stuff, and then the spouse that just was told, like they said, I can't do this anymore. And then the narcissist like just puts on tears. And then I now do this thing where I say, okay, hey, pathologically kind person, I'll come circle back around with you later, but I need to spend time here. Because what I watch sometimes is that narcissistic person, the second that other person's off the screen, they're back to like, I can't believe that she just did that. I'm like, wait, did you just see yourself? Like you were just, so then it's like, that is the manipulation tool to try to get that person to then come back into alignment.
There's not a shared moral code. And
cliffhanger. Right?
There's not a shared moral code. And so I would love for you to come back.
Okay. So I will literally like text you here in a little bit. And let's do it the next week or something. Cause I'm like, this week went too fast. Is that okay, Amy?
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay, next week we talk about the pathologically kind person that oftentimes attracts the narcissist, and we talk about why. You don't want to miss it. I know many of you don't want to do this again, so stay tuned for another great episode. And remember, every step in understanding and rebuilding trust is a step towards regaining control of your emotional life and relationships. Remember, you are the chooser in your life, and you can create the life that you want because you can. Take care, everybody.